Hi everyone, I'm going to show you a game now that I played in the Hayward tournament. Hayward's in the north of England. I'm black in this game and my opponent opened with d4 and I replied with knight f6. This was the last round of the tournament and I was out of the prizes for this one, so I decided I'll just be a bit more experimental and play some new moves. So we had d4, knight f6, knight f3, and then I went with d5, c4, c6, knights come out, and then e6, which opens up this diagonal for the dark squared bishop but blocks in the light squared bishop, and it's the sort of move that I would normally try and avoid, but I'd seen a game by Shirov, and as the game progressed his light squared bishop got free and he enjoyed a good game, and we see something similar happen in this game. So we also have certain benefits of e6 pawn strengthening the centre. So e3 is played and we'll get bishop to b4, bishop to d2, castle, bishop to d3, nice square for the light squared bishop, knight to d7, knight b to d7, and white castles. And then here I took the knight on c3. Again, a slightly unusual move for me. I'd prefer to keep the bishop, particularly the better bishop of my two, but this was justified by taking away the knight, which had a lot of control over e4. So when we see bishop takes, I play my knight straight into e4. Now we could have seen bishop takes and pawn recaptures, and then either knight g4, knight d2, attacking this pawn, but let's say knight d2, and the plan was just f5. And although I've got these ugly looking double pawns here, the e4 pawn is going to be a real thorn in the side for white. And we've also got a more open position on the king side. We can get a rook lift to f6, come over to g6, queen to g4, knight to f6 to g4, sorry, queen to g5. And if we get a move like f3, queen to g5 again, hitting e3 pawn. And so whilst positionally wouldn't be too good, there'll be plenty of counterplay for black. But my opponent instead plays queen to c2, threatening to win a pawn by taking here. But we'll just move the knight in, and now obviously bishop takes knight, gets rid of his better bishop and leaves me with a really good knight on e4, so we don't see that, and instead plays his rook to the e file. I'm going to play queen to d6 and white moves his knight forward to e5. From this position I played h6, and the main idea of this was just to get it out of the way of this queen and bishop. So if I took this bishop in future and opened up this diagonal, I'd be able to move this knight, which is what I want to do, and we'll see that in a couple of moves. So we see b4, I'll take the bishop, the queen recaptures, and I play the knight to d7, challenging this knight on e5. So knight to d7, he doesn't want to exchange knights, and he drops it back to f3, and I play rook e8, so that in future I can play e5, which will just open up the position a little bit, allow this bishop to get into play, although it would also probably lead to quite a few exchanges. And then here my opponent played c5, which I was quite pleased to see. Point is now, if I play e5 in future, even if we have exchanges, he can't take on the d5 square, which would leave me with an isolated d pawn. So I just bring the queen back to c7, and my opponent plays b5, and there isn't really much to concern black about with this move. Of course I'm not going to take it, which would weaken my pawn structure and allow his bishop to pin my knight and just make get my pieces active that much more difficult. And instead I just play e5 in the centre. Now I expected exchanges in the centre here, and white's got to be careful not to allow this pawn to advance again, e4, forking the knight and bishop. But first of all he takes on c6, so we recapture, and then he plays bishop to f5, which is an interesting point in the game, because I think we've both seen the same continuation but evaluated it slightly differently, both preferring our side. So he plays bishop to f5 and I play e4, just taking more space, and it also means that this bishop isn't getting back there, so one way or another this bishop's going to get exchanged off. Now my opponent had seen this and he just takes the knight here, and after bishop takes d7, knight e5. Now if we look at the position here, we have what looks like a very strong knight on e5 and a very bad bishop on d7 stuck behind all these pawns. But of course in chess, principles are only general principles, and we always have to look at the specifics of the position. And after bishop to f5, my opponent realises that something is up. Why would I move a bishop? Because sure they wouldn't be bothered about his knight taking a bishop when his knight seems superior, and move like rook to b8, controlling the open file, would be more natural. Well, the idea of bishop to f5 is I've now got the threat of f6, which wins the knight, because after f6 the knight cannot move to g6 because it's controlled by the bishop. G4 is controlled by the bishop, and these squares are all taken away by these pawns. So now he has to try and find a way to get his knight out alive, and he plays h3. So if I play h6, he can put his knight on the protected square g4 and then hop on to h2. So I play h5, taking away that square. And then he finds this nice little escape, f3. And here I play f6, pawn takes pawn, I take with the bishop, and then he moves back to d3. And notice if we'd taken with the pawn here, he could have gone to, he could have just played his knight to c4. So we get bishop takes, knight d3, and then I play the queen to g3, threatening checkmate in one, which no matter how obvious is always going to get your opponent slightly concerned. So he plays his queen back to d2, and then now I play g5, and g5 prevents knight to f4, so it takes away quite a promising square from the knight. And we also have ideas of advancing the pawns and opening up files against the white king. And if we look at the position now, my bishop on e5 is much better than when it was c8. Even though we've got these pawns still blocking the diagonal, it's exerting a lot of influence over important squares. And my queen just sat there on g3, it's keeping white's queen tied down. And even though white hasn't got too much to worry about here, he obviously starts to feel the pressure. So we get knight to b4 next, targeting this pawn, rook to e6 to defend it, and now white clearly believes that his game will be much simpler with the queens off the board, as his queen won't be tied down to the defence of a g2 square, and he presumes that he'll be quite comfortable in the endgame, and so he plays queen to f2, which is the decisive mistake of the game. If you want to have a quick look and see if you can see why. Okay, this is what happened. Normally I wouldn't want to exchange queens here, not because there's anything terrible about doing it, but just because I was in an attacking mood and wanted to keep things a little more attacking, or just with a few more possibilities on the board. So I'd have preferred to have kept queens here, but there's something about the position. So I take the queen, and after king takes f2, here comes a move, a5, attacking the knight, and it's got nowhere to go to. And this is quite a turnaround in the fortunes. What previously was a strong knight on e5, looking much better than the bishop on d7, this knight is now lost, and this bishop's playing a significant role in that. So he's going to lose his knight, so he plays a3 just to get a pawn back, and we'll do that deal. And then this is the sort of endgame which is really nice to play when you're on the winning side, and absolutely horrible to play when you defend. Obviously I'm not going to exchange rooks here because that will leave him with the a file, but all black's got to do here is systematically attack white's weaknesses, tie his rooks down to defense, and control more squares until there's nothing that white can do but lose material. So first off we have rook to b8. So we're targeting white's extra pawn, and he's only got one move to defend it. Notice how well placed this bishop is. It takes away this b1 square, which white would love to have available. So it's got rook a4, which is a horrible position for the rook. It's not going to do anything there. It's just got to be stuck on that square, defending that pawn. So then we get rook to e7 with a simple threat of doubling rooks and attacking this one again. Obviously this rook can't get a b1 because that's controlled by this bishop. So he plays rook to e2 to bring it to rook to b2 if I double rooks. And then now we have a nice little maneuver. Bishop to d3, rook to d2, and bishop to c4. And the idea is I just wanted this bishop on this diagonal, because now I don't have to worry about this b pawn at all, and I can free up this rook to attack other weaknesses. The bishop's completely safe on that square, and already white is running out of decent moves. Now it plays king to f3, and I advance my king. Rook to b2, which doesn't achieve anything because it can't advance that pawn, but in fairness he doesn't really have any good options here. So I play h4, just taking away more options, taking away the idea of g3, and of course the king can't move into g4 because then we just get rook takes pawn. This king is tied to the defense of this pawn, so white has really not got many options. Places rook back on the b file, and then we get another nice maneuver. Bishop to d3, attacking that rook, and so he just moves his rook back. But what was the point of bishop d3? Rook to e8, and that bishop blocks the defense along the third rank, and we're going to win the e pawn now. So rook to a3, rook takes pawn check, king to f2. So we get rook e2, rook takes. Now taking with the rook, we have to be careful because this bishop, which is protecting the rook, is under attack. So we have to make sure first of all that we can be able to retreat this bishop to a safe square, which we can. So king to f3, bishop to b5, defending the bishop. And now the plan is just to move this rook and attack these pawns from behind where they can't be defended. So white tries to exchange rooks, rook e3, probably just play rook to d2, and he's going to lose this pawn, and when this pawn's lost he's going to lose this pawn shortly afterwards, and so white resigned. So there we go. Wasn't the best played opening, but it just shows how the fortunes of different pieces can transform very quickly, and the endgame was fun to play as well. So I hope you enjoyed the game, and thanks for watching.